If you're not from Arkansas, you've probably never heard of this lake, but locals know exactly why it matters. Welcome to Lake Norrell. And this lake isn't trying to be flashy by any standards, and that's why the locals keep coming back and back and back. Just outside of Little Rock sits Lake Norrell, a place most people overlook as they're on their way to hot springs or heading to more popular spots. Here, you won't find crowds, you're not gonna find chaos. You're just gonna find water at a completely different pace. Join me. Lake Norrell is one of those places that feels quiet on the surface, but when you actually dig into it, it tells a pretty classic American story. Growth, water, utility, and eventually recreation. What you're looking at today is a man-made reservoir in central Arkansas, sitting just northwest of Benton in Saline County. It wasn't always a lake. Before it was filled, this was a stretch of rural Arkansas land made up of small creeks, wooded hollows, and farmland that blended into natural drainage of the area. Like much of the region, it was shaped by seasonal rains and runoffs, feeding into the larger watershed that eventually connects to the Saline River system. The lake itself was created in the 1950s when the area was dammed to form a municipal water supply reservoir. This wasn't uncommon for that area. Across the United States after World War II, towns and growing cities were rapidly expanding. Infrastructure had to keep up, and one of the most important needs was clean, reliable drinking water. Arkansas communities were no different. Population growth around central Arkansas, especially near Benton and Bryant, but we'll go into more of that later. So now it's time to explore this little waterway back here. You know, a lot of people come to Arkansas and they don't realize that if you just go for it, there's lots of little places you can see. So this is back here by that creek bed. I'm gonna kind of explore it and let's just take a look at like the little nooks and crannies that are in Arkansas. Here it is. This is stuff that you can find if you decide, woo, I'm gonna get off the little beaten path. And oh my gosh, look, it's a path. It's a path that you'd never know about. It's not marked. A lot of people want to know why I've decided to kind of do this channel. For me, it's because I am just tired of watching life go by without building something that actually matters, that actually is, at the end of the day, is mine, right? I've spent enough time stuck in routines, working jobs that don't feel like they lead to anywhere, or maybe they do, and just life sort of falls apart or whatever. Just trading hours for money and repeating the same thing day after day after day, and not enjoying the ducks or little places like this. I don't want that to be the story of my life, and I don't want that to be the story of your life. And that's why it's called Escape to Arkansas. It's about so much more. I want to create something that grows, something that builds momentum, and something that eventually gives me freedom. How I live every single day. This channel is me choosing direction. It's me talking about all the places I drive past, all the small towns, lakes, roads, and overlooked parts of Arkansas, and turning them into stories. Because most people don't stop to look. And had I not stopped to walk to this place, I wouldn't be here now, because there's no path to the trail. I'm building this because I don't want to wake up a year from now wondering what I could have done if I just had started, if I just had lived the life that God has given me. I'd rather start messy, start small, and I'd rather figure it out in public than stay comfortable and stagnant. And honestly, this is to become something bigger than me. I want it to be proof that you can take a phone, you can take a camera, and you can take a decision and turn it into a way for you to build your life. A way to create options for your life instead of feeling just stuck in it. And so for me, this is like the real Arkansas. This is why I do it. Lake Norrell has a place for a boating slip. It's got a lot of nature. It's got a lot of peace, right? But for me, like, these little places are about like the hidden little areas inside of nature. I'm sitting by a stream and a trail that I never would have found had I not just decided to just go for it. A lot of times, like, we live in our own prison of our mind, thinking, oh my gosh, I have to do this or I have to do that, and I'll do this when. Why not do it now? So anyway, I hope, I'm up to like 9 followers or whatever. I don't even care. I'm learning on the hooks and like things are getting better. I just finally took some effort. Just get out and enjoy life, because if you don't, like, you will miss it. It's not about going viral, and it's not about chasing trends, but it is about improving. And it's about consistency, story, and showing up every single day with intention. So this is me committing to that. One video, one place, one story at a time, until it becomes something I can look back on and say, I built that. So back to the history. The population growth meant local leaders needed to secure long-term water resources instead of relying solely on rivers or shallow wells that could fluctuate with droughts or seasonal changes. So Lake Norrell was engineered for that purpose. A dam was constructed across the local waterways to hold back water and create a controlled reservoir. Once the dam was completed and the basin began to fill, the landscape slowly transformed. What had once been low-lying forest and creek beds became a lake stretching across the hills and valleys of Saline County. Trees that weren't cleared before the flooding would have been submerged, and the contours of the land beneath the water still followed those original natural shapes today. Unlike some large reservoirs designed for navigation or hydroelectric power, Lake Norrell was primarily intended as a water supply source. That gives it a slightly different feel and history compared to bigger, more commercialized lakes. It wasn't built as a tourist destination. It wasn't meant originally for recreation. Its purpose was practical: storage, control, and distribution of drinking water for nearby communities. But like many reservoirs across the country, time changed its identity. Once the lake was established and stabilized, people naturally began to see it differently. The same water source that was built for utility started becoming a place of recreation, relaxation, and escape. Fishing became popular. Locals began visiting for quiet afternoons on the shore. Small boat activity eventually followed, though lakes like this often remain less crowded and less developed than major recreational lakes in Arkansas. What makes Lake Norrell interesting is that it sits in this in between space. It's not massive, heavy, commercialized lake like some other better known destinations in the state. It's not purely wilderness either. It exists as a working reservoir that also became a local escape. That dual identity is part of what gives it its character. Over the decades, the surrounding area has stayed relatively rural compared to nearby growing cities like Benton and Bryant. As those cities expanded, Lake Norrell became more noticeable to people looking for quiet, less crowded outdoor spaces. Instead of marinas and heavy tourism infrastructure, you get more of a natural, understated environment. Trees still dominate much of the shoreline, wildlife is common, and the water tends to feel still and reflective rather than busy or commercial. The lake's role as a municipal water source also means that there's an added layer of protection and management compared to purely recreational bodies of water. Reservoirs like this are typically monitored for water quality, and access can be more controlled in certain areas to preserve the integrity of the supply. That helps explain why it still feels more untouched compared to other lakes that have been heavily developed with resorts, restaurants, and large public beaches. From a broader historical perspective, Lake Norrell is part of a much larger pattern across mid 20th century America. After World War II, small towns and regional centers across the South and Midwest invested heavily in water infrastructure. Dams, reservoirs, and treatment systems were built not only for immediate needs but for long term growth. These projects reshaped entire landscapes. Creeks were redirected, valleys were flooded, new ecosystems formed almost overnight in geological terms. What's interesting is how quickly nature adapts. Once the lake filled, fish populations established themselves or were introduced. Birds began to use the area as a stopover. Shoreline vegetation adapted to new water levels. And over time, what was engineered for human utility became its own living ecosystem. Today, Lake Norrell sits quietly in that balance between human design and natural adaptation. It doesn't have the fame of Arkansas's major lakes, but that's part of its identity. It represents the kind of place that was built for necessity, then slowly absorbed into local life in a different way than originally intended. For someone standing on the shoreline today, it can feel almost timeless. But underneath that calm surface is a very specific story: mid century planning, regional growth, water security, and the transformation into a long term resource that also became a local retreat. And that's really the deeper history of Lake Norrell. It's not just about when it was built, it's about how a functional piece of infrastructure gradually became part of everyday life for the people around.